All right, let's talk about a Christmas tradition that's, well, a little less jingle bells and a lot more jaws and claws. We're going to dive into the absolutely wild story of Jólakötturinn, the terrifying Yule Cat of Iceland.
So, forget the whole naughty or nice list for a second. I want you to picture this. It's Christmas Eve. You just unwrapped a gift, maybe it's an itchy sweater or a pair of socks, and that piece of clothing is literally the only thing standing between you and being eaten by a giant monster. Seriously.
No, you heard me right, this is not a joke. In Icelandic folklore, if you don't get a new piece of clothing for Christmas, you could become dinner for a massive, vicious cat. It's pretty intense. So let's unpack this because there's a lot to it.
First things first, to really get a handle on this bizarre tradition, we've got to meet the monster at the very heart of it. And trust me, this is no ordinary house cat.
Okay, so Jólakötturinn, the Yule Cat. This thing is described as just an enormous beast. We're talking big enough to tower over houses and peer right into the upstairs windows. And on Christmas night, it's out there, prowling the snowy countryside with one single terrifying goal: find and devour anyone who didn't get new clothes.
This line, it comes from a really famous poem from 1932 that basically cemented the Yule Cat in modern Icelandic culture. It just paints this picture of a creature that's so terrifying you couldn't even look it in the eye. But here's the kicker. This cat doesn't work alone.
Yeah, it turns out the Yule Cat is, well, it's basically the family pet. And its owners? An even more frightening family of trolls and monsters who live up in the mountains.
So, the matriarch of this charming family is Grilla. She's this hideous ogress, and her legend goes way back, like to the 13th century. Her favorite meal? A stew made from naughty children. And the stories say she has an absolutely insatiable appetite. You can imagine, she was the ultimate threat to keep kids in line.
And Grilla doesn't just have the cat. She also has 13 sons, the Yule lads. Now, don't picture cheerful Santa-like figures. Originally, these guys were feared trolls. Each one had their own special way of tormenting people, and they'd come down from the mountains, one by one, for the 13 nights before Christmas.
And their mischief is just so specific. I mean, you've got Spoon Licker, who's described as being freakishly thin and just steals spoons to lick them. Then there's Door Slammer, whose whole deal is just waking everyone up at night. Sausage Swiper hides in the rafters to steal your food, and then there's the super creepy Window Peeper. What's interesting is these weren't just random pranks. They often tapped into the very real fears and hardships of life in old rural Iceland.
So you gotta be asking, why? Right? Why make up a giant fashion police and cat and a whole family of child-eating trolls? Well, the answer has less to do with just scaring kids and a whole lot more to do with economics.
You see, the Yule Cat wasn't just some scary bedtime story. It was actually a medieval productivity tool. The legend most likely started as a powerful way to motivate farm workers during those long, dark Icelandic winters. It was all about enforcing a really critical deadline.
The system was actually pretty straightforward. Look, everyone on the farm had to process all the wool from the autumn harvest before Christmas. If you pulled your weight and finished your work, you got a reward, new clothes. But if you were lazy, you got nothing. And that's where the cat comes in. The threat of being literally eaten by the Yule Cat made sure everyone got their work done. It was a life or death deadline.
But, like all good folklore, the story of the Yule Cat didn't just stay frozen in time. Oh no. This creature has gone through a pretty remarkable transformation over the centuries.
So the first written accounts we have, back in the 1800s, they describe this fearsome beast. Then, fast forward to 1932, a poet, Jóhannes úr Kötlum, publishes this hugely popular book of Christmas poems that really solidifies the whole story for modern Icelanders. And today, the Yule Cat has been completely transformed into the celebrated cultural icon. You can even see a giant illuminated sculpture of it in downtown Reykjavik during the holidays. How wild is that? Yeah, over time, the whole legend just got sanitized. It softened up. Those once feared Yule lads, they started leaving little gifts in kids' shoes, kind of like a Santa Claus figure. And the Yule Cat's threat? That evolved into a prompt for charity. The new message became, give clothes to those in need so that they'll be safe from the monster too.
So, this tale of a killer cat becomes a story about charity. It's a huge shift, but the original idea, the core function of the myth, that's something we are all still very, very familiar with.
Because at its heart, the Yule Cat was a story told to get people, kids and adults, to behave a certain way. And let's be honest, we haven't stopped doing that at all. We've just updated the characters.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because the parallel to some of our modern traditions is just striking. Think about it. The Yule Cat, a giant observer peering in your window, threatening you with being eaten to motivate work. The elf on the shelf, a small observer sitting on a shelf, threatening you with no presents to encourage good behavior. It's the exact same psychological tool, just with a slightly less fatal consequence, you know?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? From Santa's naughty list to all kinds of other stories we tell ourselves, folklore is never really just about the past. So the real question is, what stories do we use to shape our world today? What giant cats are we still telling stories about to get ourselves and each other to do what needs to be done?